Younger men are coming back to the church in increasingly large numbers, looking for meaning and purpose and a deep faith that can help anchor them in a world that's going crazy around them. And the question for the church is, will they stay? And will we help them stay? And having done organizational and change management consulting for companies such as Chevron and also for Dartmouth College and also for some local churches, I know that change is hard. That's why I'm offering you 5 different ways to help your church change and adjust to meet the needs of these younger men who are looking for true meaning. So the first way is to create a Sunday service that's participatory. Instead of the normal routines that you go through, which is very much one-to-many, why don't you shorten up the sermon time and open up the floor for more of a Q&A time and also for open sharing. You can do one or the other, or you can do both. Because this younger generation, they grow up in a selfie world, confessional world, and they're used to actually having dialogue back and forth. And if you open up the time on the Sunday to actually have them ask questions, you have the microphone there and they can ask concerning their doubts, questions about the faith, questions about prayer, so forth. This can create a way for them to understand and process their faith and allows people to actually see how it's like to actually wrestle with questions of the faith. And for you as pastors, that you can also guide them in the right direction and you know exactly what are concerns that are on their minds. And secondly is the open sharing, where for the new people, they can share their concerns, ask for prayer. Maybe they've learned something from the Word, and a great way for them to learn it is to actually share it. And during this time, they can also have people pray for them. And it's not for this new, younger generation, but it's also for your older members. They can also participate as well, because I believe that for too long, the church has been too much of a teaching classroom setting, where if you look at 1 Corinthians 14:26, it is a participatory model where everybody can share, of course, in order. And I think that this way will create more buy-in and more commitment, because the younger generation can understand, hey, I don't have to just go and sit there and learn. I can also ask questions and process, and it's okay. And it's like they're giving permission to say, you know what, your doubts and your struggles are totally valid, and that will create a deeper hunger to find out more, because they feel that they can ask questions and not be seen as rocking the boat, but this is seen as normal process of becoming a Christian. Number 2 is create a liturgical structure. For some of you who come from Lutheran background or Presbyterian, of course Roman Catholics and Orthodox have their own structure. But for those of us who are evangelical Protestants, we don't have a deep liturgical and church tradition. And for me, when I started understanding the prayer books and the traditions, it really added a depth to my faith. And not just head knowledge, but also a practice of the way of the Christian, so that I can become a holistic Christian. And for this younger generation, instead of teaching them just knowledge about the Bible, if you can provide them liturgical handholds, and in the evangelical side, we actually call this spiritual formation. They can learn the Lectio Divinas, or they can learn the Jesus prayers. They can learn the practice of having morning, afternoon, evening prayer sessions, and also fasting and other ways to actually become completely whole and have the full spectrum of what it means to be a Christian, not just in their hearts and in their minds, but also in their hearts and their souls. And in that way, you're connecting them to the complete history and tradition of the Christian faith. And in a small old Orthodox way, they're tying themselves to the early church and how they practice these traditions. Third way is to reorient your small groups. And if you have small groups, I would definitely look into this, is reorient their small groups as microchurches. And you're thinking, well, our small groups are microchurches. Not in the same way. A microchurch is a complete microcosm of the church in the institutional large church way. So the leaders that you're raising to be heads of these microchurches are the ones that will be your future elders. And in these microchurches, you have the rhythms of the whole church. You have prayer, you have praise, you have exhortation, you have teaching, discipleship. And these microchurches are ways for the younger generation to say, I don't have to just sit there and receive. I also have enough I can participate, because if they're Christians, the Holy Spirit's working in them, and they have every right and responsible to share as well. And within these microchurches, they can go through the rhythms of life. And as a pastor or a church leader, you can see these microchurches, and as you're connected with the people who are leading them, you're incubating future leaders for the church. And right now, generationally speaking, the institutional church is transitioning because the younger generations are used to being involved and engaged. And the way the church has been done will have to shift. And these microchurches within this larger structure of the institutional church can be a great way for these younger Christians to understand that it's not just head knowledge, but it's also active participation. And you can use tools such as the Discovery Bible Studies or Life Transformation Groups. And there's other organizations out there on Microchurch networks, the Underground, KC Underground, SOMA, who have a lot of resources. You can actually go there and actually look those up. Fourthly, I think you should also create book clubs. And especially for men, I think the challenge for men when it comes to church is a lot of times it's really touchy-feely, a lot of emoting and these feelings. And if you can create book clubs, and for me, the two books I recommend to start with is The Barbarian Way and also Wild at Heart. And if they're coming back to church, they're looking for something. And doing church as normal and discipling them the normal way, I think is not going to cut it. And I think that they demand a deeper commitment, even more than the previous generations. I think that we can give that to them. We can make them see that the Christian faith is wild and crazy and irresistible. And if we can create in them a life or death attitude about their faith is all or nothing, that can really elevate not just their lives as Christian disciples, but through them can elevate the whole church's expectation for what it means to be a Christian. And as you start doing these book reading clubs, this can become discipleship and also a microchurch out in the wild, whether they meet at coffee shops or bookstores or wherever. And then these things will start percolating up, and more people will be attracted to what the Christian faith is about through that. And then lastly, I think that tied to the microchurch is that you need to raise leaders who are not just drinking milk, but eating solid food of the faith. And you should do that through these credo classes. In a way, it's like catechism, but you take the basics using the Apostles' Creed or Nicene Creed, and you go through the essentials of the faith and also the non-essentials, how to evangelize, basic apologetics, and give them a framework for how to look at the world from a Christian lens. And this will also help you as church leaders to know I am training them in the way that is biblical and not heretical. I know that's a lot of concern for a lot of pastors, like, how do I trust these people? The question is, if you can't trust them after you've taught them, then how do you trust your own teaching? So going through these credo classes gives these people handles to understand why they believe what they believe. So through these credo classes, you're deepening the roots so that they can understand what we believe as Christians now has been there for over 2,000 years, always going back to the early church. And from that foundation, they can have more security when they're going out to the world, when they're questioning, they see all this like politicized Christianity, and they see these fallen church leaders, and they can start to see that regardless of how people outside live out and use Christianity, the roots and foundation of Christianity are true, and how they live it out is for them to determine. And they can't, and they won't have to look at other people to say, well, they live their life such a way, when they can say, okay, how do I live it the way I am called to live it? So the 5 ways are very straightforward. And I know that whether you're in a small church or large church, changing the minds of yourself first as a pastor or church leader is the hardest thing. And there's entrenched interests, and there's sometimes, unfortunately, the politics and also the agenda and priorities. But I believe that as an institutional church with a lot of boomers and Gen Xers, and now more younger people coming in, we need to start shifting our mindset towards how do the younger people engage and grow and interact with Christianity. And these 5 simple ways are not intrusive, but they can supplement and complement what you're already doing right now. Although the microchurch way might be a bit challenging for you. But I think that if you think about the younger generation, these are ways that will really engage them and help grow them into the church of the future that we all want to see grow in a healthy manner. So there you have it.